Welcome to the JMU X-Labs session on how to make wicked students. Today's problems are so complex they can't be solved by one discipline, and efforts to solve them need to be connected back to regular people off campus as well. At the same time, if the problems are so complex, how can students contribute to the process? Can undergraduates actually have an impact on wicked problems like climate change, human trafficking, or homelessness? We figured that if we were going to have undergraduates working on real wicked problems, we needed to figure out a way to develop wicked students. Over the past 6 years, the JMU X-Labs has proven we can do this. We've partnered with a variety of agencies throughout the Department of Defense and State, the Smithsonian, the Aspen Institute, to work on some of the most difficult problems those organizations face. Our process and the products we produce, Wicked Students, have attracted the attention of the Chronicle of Higher Education, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others. Here with me today are 5 members of the core faculty and research team: Dr. Bernie Kaussler from Political Science, Erica Lewis from Nursing, Patrice Ludwig from Biology, Seán McCarthy from Writing Studies, and Ben Selznick from Strategic Leadership. Our bios are on the web, so we'll get right to the questions. Say I'm your department head. So you want to teach an X-Lab class and you want to work on wicked problems. What do wicked problems and wicked students have to do with our existing curriculum?
Yeah, so I want to do that. So I'll get us started with an answer. First, I'm going to define wicked problems, although I promise we're not going to drone on and on with lots of definitions. It's just part of what we're talking about, so I'd like to share a definition. Wicked problems aren't just hard problems, right? Hard problems require a complex solution, yet they're solved in definitive times and with known techniques. Problems that are wicked, they're wicked because traditional process won't solve them. And I can sum up some of the literature on wicked problems by saying they have many causes, they're tough to describe, they don't have a right answer, and super interestingly to me, some stakeholders stand to benefit from the problem. Wicked problems require diverse perspectives to make forward progress. Interdisciplinarity allows for deeper and broader problem understanding from multiple angles, and ideas from one discipline can be applied in a new way to a new area through a lens of another discipline. Seeing how other professionals approach a wicked problem is more meaningful than hearing them talk about what they do. So what about convincing my School of Nursing department head that students need to work on wicked problems? Well, there are so many wicked problems in healthcare, and nurses play an essential role in solving healthcare's wicked problems, that it wasn't hard for me to convince my department head that courses focused on solving wicked problems are important to our student development, despite a super tight professional curriculum. One related hack, our research of students post a JMU X-Lab course supports that students can strengthen their interdisciplinary skills even through pre-professional curriculum courses. So what we've seen, that early exposure to interdisciplinary work not only builds interdisciplinary skills, but deepens the student's budding professional identity instead of threatening it, which is converse to what's prevailing in the interprofessional literature. So almost immediately when I started teaching in the JMU X-Labs classes, my colleagues noticed that I, as a faculty member working on wicked problems, was also benefiting. Bringing ideas back to my, from other disciplines back to the School of Nursing work, applying it to new ideas in both my pedagogy and to our nursing programmatic curriculum. And that was a major benefit that shouldn't be underestimated and a real selling point for department heads and other employers.
Great. Patrice, you wanna?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different kind of spin on that. So when I think about, so I'm in the biology department, and our biology students, and the way that biology has been as a discipline for a long time, is that we're all scientists in a lab doing our own thing. And so making the leap to being in a collaborative environment isn't necessarily where our curriculum focuses until the most recent kind of history. And so now our curriculum is deeply embedded in advancing a particular knowledge. Like we are training new biologists, and our curriculum is devoted to that. And that's what we are aiming to do in our department. And so that leap to like, well, how does this end up being interdisciplinary? How do I convince anyone that that's important? All I have to do is show them these are wicked problems. So look at homelessness, look at climate change, look at food security. Underlying all of those things are biological processes. And if we don't understand those deep disciplinary dives for biological reasons and how those show up in wicked problems, how are we ever going to meet the needs of society? So I think from my perspective, I hear Erica, I think it's a slight spin. It's the same coin, just a different perspective. And I think you would say the same thing, that your students are really doing a deep dive. Your curriculum is super tight. Is that right?
Yeah, and also adding that, the value of the ethics and the empathy that it takes to solve a wicked problem. I think we've all seen how the disciplinary lens is beneficial to that.
And of course, you both teach together. I mean, that's part of the characteristic of our courses, right? Is that we're in teams of different disciplines working together. So we actually have to learn empathy, not just for the problem we're working for, but like actually learn to work with each other in the room, which I think is a kind of a core characteristic. But what do you guys think of that? I mean, of working together as a part of the core part of the methodology of it?
Seán, that's a really good point, because one of the benefits of us teaching together from different perspectives is our students get to see us disagree. And that's a real benefit to them, to being able to see that tension of the disciplinary lens and how we work through that in a professional way, how we talk about it and come to a conclusion, and it's a real benefit.
Yeah, the students have also noted that when we first did it, I mean, we've done it intentionally a couple of times, but they were nervous. The students got a little scared. But again, training wicked students means they have to be prepared to understand differing points of view and then how to work through them. So the civility and the professionalism of that is an important part of training wicked students.
So you guys are already kind of approaching this a bit, but my next question was about what is different about X-Lab classes, and why aren't you already preparing wicked students in biology or political science, and so what is different?
Yeah, I can start that, and then I'll maybe Bernie, I'm curious to hear from political science what you all think. But in biology, so biology is a huge discipline in it, and there's many sub-disciplines, but we still tend to be very siloed, and so we don't tend to train interdiscipline. We haven't, I'll say that. Historically, we have not been training students to be able to work with each other. So one of the things that X-Labs is the value add for a biology student is, number one, learning how engineers approach a problem. They take that back to their biology research or their biology issues, and they say, well, how would an engineer look at this? And how do, with my disciplinary knowledge in biology, can I approach this a different way? And so I think that's one of the value adds that I've seen for my students in coming to X-Labs, but also me. I'm starting to take Seán's writing advice and his process and transfer that into my own teaching, which has helped me tremendously. So Bernie, how's that end up in political science for you?
Yes, I think not surprisingly, political scientists, we like our turfs and then we protect our turfs, right? So what I'm doing is blasphemy to some of my colleagues. They don't really know what I'm doing and what this mumbo jumbo is we do here. And of course, it's working out. We are providing, and we are providing solid and really good products. We've made a name for ourselves. But at the beginning, of course, I had to earn my stripes. Much like biology, we teach content, we teach methodology, whether it's public administration, political science, or international relations. And that is important because we need to train our students with these particular skills. They need to come into the X-Labs. So we have political scientists, physics, business majors, and communication majors working together on one problem. I couldn't have a wicked student in a political science class where I have 35 political science students. That wouldn't work. A good example would be, so we were given a problem by the Department of State on human trafficking. Now, the standard political science students would know a good amount on human trafficking in Southeast Asia and forced labor and the entire cycle. The wicked problem they were given was, how do we protect these mobile laborers from falling into the trap of some of these very unsavory companies. And in order to solve that very wicked problem, it was basically a website, and that website laborers, migrant workers could rate particular agencies. They needed a computer science student. They needed a communication major in order to fix that. But also those two majors needed a political science student, and with that particular knowledge coming in. So really they complement each other, and they need to have that skill set and that undergraduate expertise in their relative fields in order to work and solve a wicked problem.
So that's it brings us to our next question, because I think really the application of disciplinary knowledge with students working together to solve it is really the essence of wisdom. And so is the essence of wicked classes to teach students more than just knowledge, maybe like a process to gain wisdom? And what happens to students when they learn that universities are not the sole proprietary of wisdom? What happens then?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think a way of thinking about that in terms of wisdom is that we're actually trying to prompt our students to unlearn what they think wisdom is, right? So they're building up their skill and expertise in a particular major, and then they come into an X-Labs class where all of a sudden they're with students from maybe 4 or 5 different majors. They're intentionally put into teams with people that they don't usually take classes with. We give them methods of doing things, some things related to design thinking, for example, that gets them to think outside the box. And then all of a sudden, they're kind of unraveling their own disciplinary expertise in response to this really, really difficult to solve problem. So, and I think that happens for us as well, right, Bernie, as faculty, like we're all in this kind of space together where we have to think about how we show up in the world as experts or as holders of knowledge or wisdom, and how to unravel that so that we can really respond to the problem in an authentic way. It's a really difficult thing to do. It's kind of unnerving for us to let go of that sense of expertise. And it's difficult to sort of say, I don't know what the answer is. And we've got to really pull together to figure out how to solve it. And then I think it really gives the students an understanding. It's like, oh, so this is what the real world is like. Nobody actually really understands how to solve anything really big, because the answer does not lie with one answer or one way of doing things. So they've got to really, they get to really feel and experience what it's like to be in the world, trying to grapple with some of the biggest questions that face us, and realizing that we actually have to pull together in creative ways to do that. And I think, to me, that's the essence of, that's the greatest joy of doing these classes, and it's the greatest impact that we can have, is to sort of really show how that wisdom is built out of letting go, rather than saying that you know what the answer is.
It's a leap of faith for both the instructor and the student. So again, we are used to being at the lectern and completely agreeing with ourselves, right? We have 1 hour where we talk and we provide content to the students. Here we are with different instructors, different colleagues who sometimes we disagree with about methodology. Sometimes we do, and most of the times we do learn from each other. But it's a very different environment from being by yourself at the lectern and lecturing. So you have this, it's a journey, an intellectual journey, a research journey we do with the students. So it's very, very different. There's a good element of vulnerability in it, because you have to admit at some point that you actually don't know that, and you have to send the students in order to inquire and come up with a better solution if there's one working that particular week. So it's a journey for both student and faculty.
So what happens when these students, when they come into your classes, into the X-Lab class, and they find out for the first time, or they see this situation for the first time, where they're not given a situation where there is one right answer, where there is one solution, and they have to work towards that one solution. What kind of to me, when I see that happen, that's the first time you see wicked students where they're wicked pissed that that what is the right answer, and we don't give it to them. So yeah. So what happens then?
Well, the semester happens because it takes a semester to figure it out. I mean, it's not like, it's not an immediate light switch because you got to move through. I mean, I think, Bernie, you bring up the idea of vulnerability is a good one there because you've got to kind of inhabit that unknowing, right? And you've got to try things out. And, you know, we learn these kind of ideas from design culture where it's like, you learn by failing. Well, we've got to learn to fail. We've got to like try things out, go out and talk to people, get out of the office, figure out what we don't know before we actually can really figure out what we do know. And so that's not a light switch thing. That takes time. And I wish our classes were even longer than 15 weeks because we'd learn more, but that's the semester system. But I think a really big part of that is the journey, right? It's not something that happens immediately, and it's, yeah.
But how are we, I mean, I think we try really hard to support them in that. So asking them to just discover it isn't enough. So I think each of us take the moments. I'd love to hear. So, I mean, Bernie and you and I don't get to teach together all that often, but we scaffold them. Yes, they're on that trajectory, but we can't let them flail through it or else they're not going to learn it. So Bernie, what are you doing to get them there?
Well, I think it takes a particular type of student who's showing up in the first place. So we don't always have the A students, sometimes we have the B students, but they really exceed in that particular environment, design thinking or startup principles in solving particular wicked problems. So that's important that we, you know, for anyone wanting to emulate our concept is that it's not the first class student always. It's really committed student who enjoys design thinking and enjoys working with others. I think part of that is for us to make get the students not getting attached. Since design thinking is based on iteration, it takes, as Seán said, a whole semester. Sometimes they think that they've found the solution in week 3, and
it's usually an app.
And it's usually an app. That's the classic. Sometimes it's an app. Sometimes it's a website, but not always. Sometimes it's just an idea and a concept which that particular client wants. So the attachment to their product, the emotional, for us to disengage that attachment, it's quite painful for the students. There's a lot of friction. That's friction, again, between faculty and between students. But that is the true joy of that's very, very different from any other class. And all the students we've had will tell us that. We lose students, of course. In week 2, week 3, they're like, okay, this is way too much work. But those students who make it through, they're not there for the grade anymore. They're attached to the product once the product is actually working out, and they want to deliver something for their client.
Yeah, I think they get the bug of solving problems, which is really the interesting thing.
And so, I'd like to add though, before you move on, about that moment, like you talked about the moment where you've introduced the problem and you're handing it over to the student. That takes a special, a moment of reserve in the faculty, right? It's kind of like when you say something in front of a group and it's silent for a couple of minutes and you just have to sit there. Yeah. You have to like resist grabbing that problem back and solving it. Yeah. Which I still to this day, my heartbeat is like going. And every time the students grab it. And then, as Patrice said, we offer that scaffolding to help them move forward.
I love that. I love that tipping point. There's a kind of that tipping point we've talked about, like about week 8 or 9, where they've like been researching this problem really deeply for a number of weeks. And then they have this sense of ownership over it. And because they've been like looking at it from an interdisciplinary perspective, as a group, they know more about the problem than we do. So we kind of move back into a support role at that stage. And that to me is like the magic where, it doesn't always happen at the same time. And some groups may never reach that. Most of the groups get there where they're like, oh, wow, I own this now. They own their work in a way that they're not relying on us anymore, and all we can do is support their onward movement. I mean, I love when that happens. That to me is like, that's just great.
So next question, at the strategic level, is this really important? So who cares, who should care, and how does preparing students to work on wicked problems contribute to those bigger questions and solutions? Ben, you want to jump in on this as a strategic leadership guy?
Yeah, sure. And I'll turn to Erica to kind of give some of the on the ground. But I think it's really important to consistently articulate the value proposition of such courses, right? There's, value proposition, the simplest way is, the cost should be greater than the benefits, right? And there's multiple stakeholders. There's a value proposition for the students themselves who might experience discomfort in actual learning. There's the discomfort for the faculty. There's definitely discomfort for the university and department chairs who look at this and don't know what to make of it and see it as a challenge of resources. And then there's value propositions to the community. And these days, the interaction between the university and its community is more pronounced than ever. So I think it's really important to kind of think about not just doing this stuff, but really being mindful that as you're doing it, you're consistently articulating the value proposition to all the relevant stakeholders involved.
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess my answer to who should care is humans living in the world. As we've talked about with wicked problems, our world is at like an important crossroads with wicked problems all around us. So to state the obvious, a global pandemic, not to mention issues of systemic racism in the US, climate change, and in Silicon Valley and elite institutions, they can present some ways to solve these problems. Yet, just like interdisciplinary diversity is required to solve wicked problems, so is diversity of approach. So I think we all can get on board that wicked students at a broad range of institutions is something that's going to be valuable for the world. And I will also add that employers already do care. Anecdotally, we see that our JMU X-Labs graduates are paid a higher salary as compared to their disciplinary peers. I don't know, I'd be interested in the group's thought about why that's so. Some of the things I've thought about are that, sadly, often what employers are looking for isn't present in college graduates, the ability to identify problems, understand problems, develop solutions. And remember that these wicked students have developed some skills to work on diverse teams. I mean, who among employers in this conversation doesn't like the sound of that? And finally, traditional logic tells us you can't teach innovation and ethics at the same time. And one of my areas of training is in bioethics. And so somewhat controversially, I actually feel the complete opposite, that, and we've seen this with some of our research as students post-course, that when students weigh the unintended consequences of these solutions they're working on, and when they're able to work on these wicked problems, they're presented with these tensions where they can really learn ethical reasoning, and exciting to see. Thoughts from others?
Yeah, just to quickly add 2 points on that. One is that far more employers are looking for really good members of teams, right, that have a lot of diversity in them, right? And that is, you can tell the story of a student to say, this is the kind of project I've done. And as was mentioned before, this is a very different approach to preparing students than sage on the stage. This is almost the exact opposite of that. So it gives the students not just, I think I might be good at working on a team with people. No. It gives them an exact experience that they can discuss where these skills have been developed. The other side of this that I want to pick up on with Erica that I think is vital is for a very long time, innovation and entrepreneurship have been restricted mostly to the business school, mostly to engineering, has not brought in the widest racial presentation. And these types of courses and these types of approaches upend all of that, right? They suggest that everybody can and should be an innovator. That being an innovator is part of what it means to be college educated in the 21st century, not just, oh, I think I'm an innovator. No, giving people an exact true experience, an authentic learning experience that they can describe and that they can carry forward. So I think these types of pedagogies are really, really valuable to a variety of stakeholders, and certainly translate well to a lot of students across disciplines as they enter the labor market.
So Ben, I have a question about that then. On the flip side of that, are we sending out armies of disruptors? And so now we're sending all of our students into the workforce to say, no, we're here to innovate. We know how to do it. We're wicked students. And then, so how do we balance that tension? I mean, in theory, like I hear what you're saying and I agree with it. And on the flip side, I could also think that, if everybody is identifying as an innovator, then does anybody actually work together?
And does innovation actually have to be disruption, which I think is something that like we need to kind of like decouple those terms. But I don't know, Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, actually what I would say, given how you presented, you know, week 3, week 8, week 9, I think it's more damaging for the students that don't get these types of experiences, right? Those are the ones that come in and say, I can solve it all. I have all the answers. Look at me. And by week 3, they burn out because they don't know what to do. They haven't worked on a team with computer scientists, with engineers. They haven't worked on a team with people that aren't like themselves, and they burn out, right? So I would actually say that these types of courses maybe get responsible disruptors out into the labor market who understand that disruption isn't a flick of the wrist. It's a 15, 22-year process that involves a lot of people, a lot of time, and a lot of sweat equity.
Well, and I might add, I've had the pleasure of interviewing some of our graduates from JMU, so people who have graduated but took an X-Labs class, and there's lots of stories that come to mind, but one in particular was a new nurse, and she was working on a floor in a DC hospital. She'd had some special training about how to work in a code situation, and she was called to a code situation. You all know what that means, right? From medical TV, somebody's heart stops, or they're stopping, yeah. So she was a relatively new nurse. She gets into this code situation. There's no nurse practitioner or doctor present, the people who would normally take the lead. She ended up taking the lead in this situation and hopefully creating a different outcome for that patient. It wasn't going very well, and she created some order and chaos. So I was reflecting with her. I was like, why did that go well for you, and why did this come to mind with my question? And she said it was really her disciplinary training that gave her the knowledge to do that, but it was her experience in the X-Lab and interacting with multiple professionals that gave her the confidence to step up as the leader that day when no one else in the room was willing to step up. That's not really your traditional definition of being a disruptor, right? She was functioning within the scope of her profession, but really willing to step up as a novice in a way that you would traditionally think a leader nurse would step up.
So now that we've covered a lot of the challenges, how can the work be supported in the face of entrenched bureaucratic inertia? Because that's, I think a lot of folks kind of view higher ed and many other like big institutions as having this inertia. So how does this all work? How can we support faculty and students and programs like this?
Well, if you listen to someone like Scott Galloway, who was speaking at the pre-conference, you know, we're going to face the biggest threat. Higher ed is going to face the biggest threat it's ever faced in terms of remaining relevant, right? So we've got to figure, if we think, and I think everybody on this call thinks that this kind of work is a major value proposition for higher ed moving forward, I think part of it is that we've got to tell better stories about what we do. We got to reach all of those stakeholders and, you know, explain the value of this kind of work. We've got to do research around it because that's the way that we're going to need. And I think we've got to realize as well, it's not an either or proposition. I think a lot of the time when people think about innovation, it's like, oh, so we can't do anything the old way anymore, that it's all got to be the new way. But that's not the way that the world works, right? I think that what we need to do is to support this kind of effort, this sort of experimental culture can be nested within a bureaucratic culture. In fact, they're symbiotic. You need one to feed the other, right? I'm looking at my ecologist friend Patrice here when I say that. Like, it's not a question of either or. And I think the more that we can see how these are actually mutually beneficial and learn how to support cultures of innovation, whether you want to call them disruptive or not, I don't really care. But we need to put our faculty and our students into relationship with each other around these kind of really, really complex problems and actually have an impact in the world. Not just train for it, actually do it, which is something that I'm not sure we're bringing up all that clearly in this talk, is that like we're working with clients doing this. We're not running simulations. We're working with all these organizations working on problems. So we need to really
want solutions.
Yeah.
They really want.
Right, and that changes the whole thing because students are then not just working for a grade, they're working for the organization, they're working for the problem, and it changes their relationship with everything. It changes our relationship as faculty too, right? So we need to create portals of experience for everybody to have access to this kind of work, while not jettisoning everything else, right? Not every education experience can be this public, intense, messy, design-driven thing. That's not the way that education works, but we've really got to learn that both of them need to be feeding off each other in the same space. And I think we're not there yet, right? Yeah. I think we're not there yet. There's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of work to do to make that clear. And I think once we do that, we could be getting somewhere. But I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to boil some of that down to two, straightforward things. The first is mission, right? And the second is differentiation. So to the first, what is the mission of higher education, right? If you look at mission statements, a lot of them talk about preparing leaders and thinkers for the 21st century world. Well, the 21st century world I live in is in chaos, and these wicked problems are everywhere all the time. So if we want to prepare them for a world where they're only going to work with right answers with people that think and look just like themselves, that's not the 21st century world, okay? So if this is what colleges want to prepare students for and say is their mission to prepare students, then this is what it looks like. And it's different and it's challenging and it's not easy, but this is what it looks like. And this goes double, triple, quadruple for public institutions. For public institutions that have a mission and a mandate to prepare educated workforce for their states and their communities, this goes way beyond as a core mission of public institutions. To the second, differentiation. What makes your school different from everybody else? Or if we want to really think about this, what makes the higher education as we know and love it different from certificates, from badges, from Google programs, from all of the rest of the competitors? Because they're not coming, they're here. Okay, and so it's really imperative that this differentiation approach optimizes what's already here, what's already working in higher ed, to transform it in beneficial ways, right, that actually do a much better job preparing the students that are in demand in the world today.
Great, great. We have a couple of questions that I think we should get to. The first one I'm gonna ask Seán and Bernie to answer, and that is, how do you create wicked students whose first language is not the same as those of the other people in the class or at the university? Very convenient that we have an Irishman and a German on the team.
I'm going to let the German go first on that one.
I was going to say I'd let a non-native speaker go first. Seán, please. I mean, I
love your attempts at humor, Bernie.
one good. So JMU, we don't have that many international students. So that's a shame. But so other universities certainly, I'm sure have a lot more. One good example was that we had an exchange student from Taiwan. His English was good, but his IT skills were incredible. And the problem they were working on was a problem given by NATO. And NATO was on making troop mobilization more efficient. And that particular team came up with a decision-making tool for senior officers to be done. It will be rolling out soon, the beta version for their school in Oberammergau in Germany, at the NATO officer school. It wouldn't have happened without that particular exchange student from Taiwan. His comfort zone was economics, economic thinking, and economic modeling. That was a language he was very proficient in. His English was very good too. And he really took the lead in that, and the students really followed his idea, and his idea was the one which was the winning prototype for that particular problem. I think we create a good environment for non-native speakers to feel comfortable. Seán, do you have any?
No, I just love the way that you're bringing up the idea of different kinds of languages, right? That's, we're not just speaking about lingua franca. We're thinking about like different disciplinary languages and seeing how how we can actually support students' expertise in different kinds of languages to participate in the team, even if there are kind of other kinds of language barriers. And I want to throw this out to the team, but I'm also thinking we're all in a Zoom box right now, and we're recording Zoom calls all the time, and there are transcripts now, and transcripts can be translated. And I think we're going to be in a much more hybrid world, and thinking about lingua francas, how the movement to kind of more hybrid from straight up face-to-face is going to enable more languages to be facilitated in group and project work through transcripts and recordings and direct translations. I think the technology can also help us out here. But I'm really interested in the idea of just expanding our idea of what languages are and what languages have currency, rather than making it a technological solution. But I do think the technology's got a role to play here in having that kind of collaboration be deepened.
Can I jump in too, though? I also think that the language part of it is really important, and we are training students. I think Erica mentioned this earlier. One of our massive point of all of our classes is building empathy and building strong teams and building, and it's all a relationship based. Every single course, every single team is relationship based. And we spend a lot of time teaching students how to be in relationships with each other, you know, in a professional way. But I think part of the language thing we have, yes, we don't run up against it very often in terms like the actual, like, not a non-native speaker in the course, but we haven't run into it because we're also doing all the cultivation for how to operate with people on your team. That's your team, like
including dancing,
the people,
including dancing and flocking and all those kinds of tools. So
Yeah.
thinking about embodied movement, right, as a way of also creating relationships.
Yeah, all sorts of, and I think this is the first time where I saw real demonstrable value in diversity of so many kinds. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but boy, I tell you what, you get in a class like this and you hear all of these voices and all these different perspectives, and the ideas that come out of one really add value when they're joined together and sort of crowdsourced. It truly is demonstrative of the value of diversity. We've got a couple other questions we need to get to. So this is a great one. I love it, and we've been working on this. So I'm gonna just throw it out there. How are you prepared to teach like this? And the question goes on: was it trial and error, or do you have some suggestion for how to do this? And what's your approach in education? And that I'll say that question is really what's driving a lot of what we're doing now is, and we've been asked to develop curriculum for faculty and kind of build this out. And we have ongoing relationships with other universities as we're trying to figure out exactly what that is and how do we prepare faculty, because this is not how faculty are prepared when they become, you know, professors of biology, professors of nursing. This is not how they're prepared. So I'll throw it out to the group. Anybody want to jump on that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
I can add, you know, it is some trial and error, yet you can benefit from our lessons learned. And we have some of that in published literature and just, you know, through our informal thoughts here. Some of the things that come to mind are having strategic conversations as you go into the class about what your teams are going to look like, because teaming is such a big part of it. And we have our students in consistent teams throughout the entire semester, and that team works on one aspect of the wicked problem throughout the entire semester. And we found that allows them to develop these relationships where they can be kind and candid with each other. It allows us to develop a coaching relationship with them. And we do move into a much more coaching role in our work and have developed those specific skills.
There were human elements that we had to learn too. Like, I don't know, Erica, I think you and I were reading all of Brene Brown's books at the exact same time and showing up to class being like, okay, well, now we're in this learning partnership and we are vulnerable and we are not the experts. And, you know, so there was some trial and error, but there was also some, I don't want to say it's like a role cultivation, but like, how are we going to show up in these classes?
I totally think it's a role cultivation. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, sorry to cut across, but I was thinking about like how we probably, a really good marker of a successful team is if they get to meet a lot the semester beforehand to get to know each other and like develop a sense of trust. And actually that sense of role development, like I'm going to be good at this, I'm not so great at that we learn, that we lean in each other's strengths. It's really difficult to do that if you're just showing up in the room. And we have just shown up in the room and not known who we've been teaching with, but it's not ideal, because I think it's the way to do that, you've got to develop a sense of trust. If you're going to be vulnerable, vulnerability is based on trust. And to develop trust, you just don't, it's not something that's right there. So like there needs to be some really careful and intentional work done in the faculty team prior. Very much exemplifies what Project Aristotle from Google is talking about, is that this sense of trust and what makes an effective team.
Okay, so the Strength Finders assessment and use that as part of our training.
We're getting short on time. Let's see, the next question, could this work on at a community college level?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
I
And
think
in fact, in some ways, community colleges are better set up to do this already.
But I would say that that it takes a deliberately trained team. You have to really think about and create the circumstance and situation to support a project like this. So it's not just something you can't just create. It's not a space, right? It's the relationships of the faculty and the relationships of the student that will make it work. And of course, those could happen in a community college.
I mean, the bottom line, it's cheap, right? It just requires the political will to do it. It doesn't
That's
require
right.
buildings. It doesn't require technology. I mean, I know it might be a formidable task, the political will, but it's very, very cheap to emulate.
So,
And it can work fast, yeah.
Another question, such progressive programming, but still within the traditional semester. Any thoughts on intensive programming, doing it over a summer, winter break, or stackable modules? I think
Yes.
one of the challenges, yeah, we've thought about it. It's really, it is challenging work for people to process the information, reflect on what they did, and go through all that system of really understanding what's expected. To do that in an accelerated fashion, it is complicated. And so,
But it's
I'd say,
doable. Nick, I would say it's doable. Seán and I did it when we took the kids abroad. Like, I mean, you can do it in design.
You design for your time frame.
design for it, right?
You design for your time frame, so it's doable. But I think I don't know. Again, what do you think? I would err on longer rather than shorter times. I mean, if we're really going to go at big things, but yeah, I mean, the 15-week semesters is not ideal. I don't think it's ideal for anybody in a lot of ways. But that's kind of part of the infrastructure we're dealing with. So. But you can totally do it in shorter times. I mean, there's also sprint ways of doing it in 4 weeks or shorter.
And also the follow-up, what do you do when they get done? Like, do we have the second wave?
That's right. That's kind of another project that we're working on, is what happens next. All right. So with that, I think we close out our session. And I thank you all for joining remotely, all of our the studio audience and the folks that are on the panel. We appreciate your attendance. We appreciate the great questions, and we look forward to hearing more from you. Much of the research discussion are on the website. We have a website, jmuxlabs.org. Feel free to jump on there and look at the research and some of the documentation that's come up there. Yeah. Any other closing comments?
Try it. Try it.
Right.
Just do it. Like,
Do
try
it.
No, seriously, it's really worth it.
All right. And with that, I think we are complete. Thank you very much.